today we're going to be talking about something quite sensitive, sensitive to all of us, and that's the emotional and spiritual well-being during a crisis. And that's why the first person I thought of was Liz Bussey. And Liz and I go back at least 2 decades, if not more than that, probably a little bit more than that. And she's one of our lead educators in England. But more than that, she has a plethora of experience, particularly dealing with life coaching and the psychology of well-being. She's a body-mind specialist. She's been through NLP training as an NLP practitioner. She also went through recently the functional medicine specialist, something I'm very jealous of because I love functional medicine and I've been threatening to go through that. So I'm going to pick your brain later about that. She also has gone through human potential life coach training, craniosacral therapist, and global self-actualization and psychological fitness specialist. So she's got a lot of titles, but more importantly, a lot of experience. And I'm really looking forward to having her with us today as we talk about these really important items. And this is probably our largest gathering ever on a Pilates Hour. And I think there's a good reason for it. I was telling Liz just before we came on the air that today at lunchtime I was watching the news and got very emotional. You know, it's not uncommon for Brent Anderson to get emotional, but I was just feeling this sense of sadness as I was listening to people telling their stories of in the medical field that are taking care of people that are suffering from the coronavirus or that are, you know, passing away and what's going on. And I just sat there and I reflected and I observed what I felt. I felt this sadness and I realized that, you know, this is a probably common emotion that's going around right now. And what I want to do is talk about the positive emotions and behaviors as well as the negative emotion and behaviors today. And you know, as we get going into this. So before we go there, I'd like for Liz just to tell us a little bit about, you know, her work and maybe how it has impact on this crucial time right now of us seeking well-being emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brent. I just want to say the first thing is thank you for inviting me to actually join you here today. And I'm going to say be by your side. And that for me is really, really important right now, is to be by your side and by anyone's side. Because often in the job that I do, it can feel like I'm instructing or telling somebody what's a better way of being. But actually what I've learned from some of my recent trainings is that the most important thing, especially let's say from a heart level, is to sit beside somebody. And almost, you know, in some ways take their hand, not necessarily literally, but take their hand and guide them not where I think they should be, but actually on a route and a journey that they feel that they can manage. So the work that I'm doing right now is, gosh, incredibly significant. And again, I feel really, really grateful that I've put the work in. And actually not just in the training that I've done, but put the work in on myself. And I want to say that, you know, we can have many qualifications. And I was smiling when you were listing the qualifications. And I can feel my own resistance a little bit to that. And
well, I was going to say, one thing is one of your trainings is the ego detox program. And I said, ooh, I'm scared of the ego detox program because sometimes too many titles, you know, mess with our egos.
Well, right. This is why, you know, I run that program, and we can talk a little bit more as maybe questions come up a little bit later. But just to say to everyone that, you know, we're here, let's say, not for necessarily for our credentials, and maybe that's to help myself feel better about that. But I'm really here to be with you guys today, however many of you are out there, and to be with me and to speak truthfully and honestly, so I can share from that place and role model what I feel is what a coach is, rather than I'm speaking from an academic self. So I'm going to do my best to speak from what's coming up for me, rather than what I think I should tell you.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Liz,
Yeah.
for bringing that up. I think that, I've often mentioned in the last, couple of years, just a book that really touched me that I've looked at many times, but The Untethered Soul, and the idea of just being the observer and
Right.
being, and not feeling like I have to influence you to think a certain way, but let me observe how you think so that I can get to know you better. And like you said, be with you. I think that's such a crucial viewpoint of, allowing people, tolerance, acceptance, creating safety, those kind of things. And today really is about you in the audience, so our friends, our guests, anybody that's on, that you get to ask questions, and we're going to process those questions as best as we can. And again, like I said, I think that Liz put it very well, that we're here with you, and we want to maybe not so much even being a pillar. We just want, if it's a little bit of suffering, we want to suffer with you. If it's a little bit of rejoicing, we want to rejoice with you. If it's a little bit of compassion, we want to have compassion with you. And to try to understand, and I think more importantly is just to be able to express. And I think so often, it just doesn't seem right to be able to express ourselves. Either we're afraid of sounding like we're complaining, or we're afraid of sounding like we got our stuff together, on either end of the spectrum. But we just want, to hear from you, and then create the dialogue that Liz and I can, and hopefully some way, spread a little bit of insight as to how we can look at ourselves, and how we can, the old cliche of the glass half full or half empty, of how we can maybe shift the paradigm of what our situation is. And I mentioned that I wrote down some emotions and behaviors. And as we sort of go through those, I'm going to list the positive ones first, because I think that's a good place for us to get started. And again, if you have any questions, by all means, please feel free to send those questions in through the chat. Okay. So, and Liz, some of the things that I was looking at, thinking of, like, whenever there's crisis or tragedy, it seems like it's a time of reflection, right? So once we get past the panic and the fear or the sadness, all of a sudden it's a time of reflection. It's like, what's important right now? What's important to me? What am I doing with my life? And, we all have been through this, when somebody's died in our lives and our families, or you lose a job, or a natural disaster comes, like a hurricane or earthquake. And it almost always results in some of these positive behaviors and emotions that I want to bring up. So I put down things like gratitude. And people like, gratitude about what? I lost my job, I lost my studio, I lost my business. What am I grateful for? Well, if you start digging, all of a sudden, all these things start blossoming up that represent gratitude. And faith. I think sometimes, who really knows when the COVID-19 pandemic is going to be over? I mean, nobody really knows. We especially know that our president doesn't know right now, and the leaders of the world don't know. It changes every day. And so to some degree, I feel like I have to just have faith that I am going to make it through this, that there is a bright side to this somewhere. The earth is cleaning itself. The air is cleaner. There are good things happening. People are serving other people. Compassion, kindness, family focus. And one in particular that I wrote down was forgiveness, and either seeking forgiveness or forgiving others. That a lot of times we carry these burdens around in our families and our friends and businesses. And to me, that's another one that I often find sort of rises up, and people are like, I don't want to have hard feelings towards people in my family or my friends. And so they pass through that. And then another one I put down was healthy behavior. So, some people start eating better and, exercising and sort of refocusing on things. Any thoughts on any of those kind of positive emotions or behaviors that sometimes manifest as a result of the crisis?
Yeah, I mean, each one you said, I could feel inside my body, which I really enjoy the fact that right now I'm also a body worker. So there's something about when something's said, I can experience many responses that sort of arise up from each one of those words. And one word that came up, Brent, was the word connection, because it seems like with each word that you said, there's a link. Okay. And I'm not saying that I know exactly what that link is, but something in me had an experience of, wow, there seems to be a thread and a link throughout those words. And then at the end, when you got to the end, the word that then came to me was, and it's not necessarily seen as a positive or even as a negative, and that's the word patience.
Absolutely. There's I remember a comic I saw years ago, and it was like, God give me patience and give it to me now kind of thing. But it was like, what he ended up getting was like some kind of disaster. It's like, be careful what we ask for, right?
Right.
We do have a comment. This is from Jonan Hitchcock, and it says, I find giving is a good way to find fulfillment of self. And I appreciate that comment. Jonathan, actually. It's Jonathan Hitchcock. Little typo there on my end. But thank you for that. I do think that, we live in a world, and here's maybe a good topic to go on, thanks to Jonathan. We live in a world that often wants us to believe that worldly things that we receive, things that we get, is what's going to make us happy. And I remember reading in a book by Dr. Lustig, it was called, slipping my mind, but I'll find it and I'll share it with you in the post-production. But he talks about the behavior difference between pleasure and contentment. And neurologically, he's an endocrinologist from San Francisco and a pediatric endocrinologist, and deals a lot with diabetes and metabolic disorders of youth. And his whole thing was that in our nervous system and the neuropeptides and the neurotransmitters like dopamine, for example, is the primary one for pleasure. It's a very short-lived one. And serotonin type 2A fibers are, and serotonin type 2A is more about contentment. And, do we live a life that is filled with contentment, or are we always seeking pleasure? And, a world that focuses on selfish behavior of seeking pleasure never has the same level of stability or well-being as the person who knows who they are and, is content with what they have. And there's another element that he said often accompanies that, and that is what Jonathan just mentioned, which is serving others. And even from a standpoint of chronic pain, I mean, one of the first things I ask them is like two things. One, you can't be on a chronic pain support group. And two, if you want me to treat you, you have to donate 2 hours a week to some kind of, not-for-profit or group of people that have more needs than you do. And it's amazing at what happens when people get lost serving and helping other people, to their pain, to their sorrows, to their fears. They almost melt away when we become less self-absorbed and more interested in other people, helping them.
Yeah. Can I add something to that?
Absolutely. I'm opening the space for you.
Yeah, this is a really important aspect or area of consideration, because I know for me, is like I spent so many years thinking that I was here to let's say serve people, because I trained in this and trained in that to do with body work or as a practitioner. What I was doing was I was making decisions, again, mainly, let's say, I'm going to be really simple here, but mainly from my head. And actually from a sort of egoic mind state, I was running my life and thought it was the right thing to do, to help people. But the thing was, I was helping people from that aspect of me. The way that I wanted to, which was obviously from my identity. But what I've realized now, and it's taken some work, it's not an easy thing, but the ability to drop down, not to get rid of that part of me, because that's part of who I am, to include that, but actually to drop further into me and allow myself to experience realms within me that are far deeper, and then wait there, which is where the patience comes, and ask the question, what does life want from me? Not what do I want from life? Okay, so, and that question literally shifted the whole game for me. And I was like, whoa, I've been asking the wrong question. What do I want for myself? No, what is it that life might want from me? What's my truest
It's interesting
commitment?
you say that, because I know in my spiritual upbringing, one of the questions is, how can, along those lines is, how am I supposed to manifest in this world? How am I an instrument in your hands, God? Like, what am I supposed, rather than, hey, I want to be a leader in a community,
Yes,
or, those kind of things, which might come from a different place. That's a great
that's
point.
right. Mm.
That's a great point. Liz, take a little bit and talk to us a little bit about sort of some of your projects that you're working on. So
Yeah,
the
sure.
Human Home Project, and
Yeah. We have one. Meaning the human home, it came out, those two concepts actually came out of a meditation. It sounds a bit sort of trendy and maybe alternative, but it's true. I used to try to make ideas and pull them out of my brain, and it wasn't that they didn't work, but actually they didn't have a lot of depth in them. Whereas now actually I wait until an idea arises. And there was something that came up for me that after about 20 years of working with people and exploring my own body, and also having an autoimmune condition, it's kind of forced me again to be very aware of what is this that's allowing me to be here, and the importance of the human form, not just the anatomy and physiology, but the fact that this vessel of mine, of ours, is allowing me to see, hear, smell, relate, and be here right now. I only have one. And so therefore, this sounds maybe very strong, but it's like, wake up, take residency, and be in what is the gift that's been given to me in this life. And that was a very, very strong calling. And so the name came out, which is Human Home. Now, what does that involve? Well, it's a mentoring process for people who want to do the same. So again, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, so give me an example of what that might look like. Like, how would that manifest? So somebody's listening now and they're going like, yeah, I think I'm in alignment with what Liz is saying. What do they do?
Yeah, well, so what happens on a sort of, let's say, everyday level is people often are referred, or they call because somebody said you need to go and see Liz because one, she's pretty unusual in the way that she facilitates, meaning that it's not a normal life coaching scenario. So we don't set goals, okay? Are there goals that appear? Yes, but we work with whatever comes up in a session. So it's a normal session for like 60 minutes, like any practitioner would. You'd come along, we sit together, and it's not that you don't set your intentions. I do beforehand ask people to list a few intentions, but I always say to people, the intentions that you write down are not the true intentions as to why you're there. Which is the exciting bit, because the intentions that often we start with, go for it. I can see you want to share something?
No, I'm thinking, I mean, I do have a couple questions and comments that are waiting to come in, but I'm thinking more about what you're saying in,
Yeah,
there's an element of being present that you're expressing there. And
yeah,
there's elements of observing rather than forcing.
very good.
So I like that. We'll come back to that in a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
This is from Sarah. She said, in all of your combined expertise, what would be the best way from our unique perspectives to protect ourselves from the virus? I'm especially interested in the perspective of functional medicine. So Liz, if you want to take that one, I don't want to go too far off on the virus protection, but
Yeah,
from a
yeah.
functional medicine perspective, and to me, I'm going to say something very simple on the spiritual side of it, but go ahead and maybe say what comes to your mind.
And it's Sarah? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sarah is, I'm going to say one thing, it's not necessarily very functional medicine, and that is to really look after you, is to really take care of your own immune system, which means listening to the signals that are coming from you. Okay, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people saying many, many different things about what you should take, what you should eat, when you should do it, and how you should do it. My biggest comment is please listen to you and self-regulate from your own wisdom. And often we need a little bit of guidance with that, and that's where, you know, I sit with guiding people by their side. So hopefully that gives you something. It might not give you the answer, but it will give you some level of insight.
Yeah, I was just going to revert back to Joseph Pilates and say the 9 essentials. And we, in matter of fact, we had a webinar on this last week. So if you want more information on that, Sarah, feel free to connect with us and get that. If you didn't already, get that webinar that was on boosting our immune system. And you know, we looked at everything from Chinese medicine to sort of some modern nutrition. And my viewpoint on it was like, look, if we have a well-balanced life and we're stimulating the immune system likes social interaction like we're having right now. The immune system, you know, likes to be quiet sometimes too. So it's like that meditation in the day and that mindfulness time period stimulates and turns off that limbic system that interferes with it and allows the natural immune system to boost itself. And then, you know, if you have any way of being outside, we know that fresh air and sunshine that Joseph talked about, we know that exercise and listening to what your body wants to eat and getting plenty of sleep, those were all part of Joe's essentials. So, I mean, I always get a kick out of it going back, you know, 100 years later and saying, you know, Joe is pretty in tune with the simple basics of a lot of these things. Let's see, I have another one from Gladys Yu. It says, I'm now trying to make a decision whether to go back to the hospital and serve other inpatient, as my outpatient clinic I had to close last week, or staying home as I'm afraid to get something and pass it to my kids once I get back to work. It's not easy, Brent. I'm on leave now, and this is what stresses me. What do you think? And boy, I wish I had, you know, I had that thought today. And you know, it's like, do we put ourselves at risk when we have the capability of being the heroes that are out there right now, that are nurses and doctors and police officers and firefighters that, you know, every single day they're now dealing with hundreds of people with a life-threatening virus that we don't quite understand. And, you know, the reality of it is if we do go back into that, those of us that are healthcare professionals, if we go into that field and we go in and expose ourselves, then we have no right coming back home. You know, not until you're clear, because you know, if you're going to take on that role, and that's a tough one, that there's nobody that can tell you it's right or wrong. It has, like Liz had mentioned, it has to come from inside of you to know, you know, is that your calling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any thoughts on that's a tough one for me because I'm dealing with it right now.
Yeah. I really want to appreciate you right now, Brent, for expressing your real honesty in, you not just talking about emotions, but actually being being those emotions. So no, just really appreciate that. Can you remind me of her name?
Gladys.
Gladys. Gladys, I'm talking to you. And in fact, I'm talking to everyone. The thing here is that it sounds like, and this can happen frequently, we end up with these two options. Is it this or is it this? And that's what we call, sort of in the coaching therapeutic world, is a double bind. Shall I do this or shall I do this? So when people with me end up in those kind of dualistic places, I say to them, stay still. Just be still. And just hold here these two options and notice you, because I always say to people, who's in the middle? And there's nothing that you have to do here except just be here and notice who's in the middle and drop into that place and wait. Because if you do, some kind of answer will arise. If you focus on this or this, you're going to ping pong between the two, and it's like almost a freeze state. So hopefully that was helpful for you.
That's great advice. She does mention a little further on, saying meditation and praying, relaxation techniques I learned from Polestar is what's helping her now.
Yeah.
And again, I think it is it being in that quiet space and just being the observer rather than asking which one's right. It's a great advice.
Yeah.
Jonathan asked a question. He said, do we ever, this is the same Jonathan from before, do you ever give your time for free? And if so, what do you get from that? You know, I do give my time free quite often. You know, and I'm a big component of service, and service can manifest in many, many different ways. There could be service professionally, there could be service in organizations, there could be service when you're at the grocery store and you see somebody that just needs to have you help them pick up a bag or something like that. And, you know, when you look at our services as a Pilates teacher or a physical therapist or a life coach or a psychologist, whatever our roles are, there are times when, you know, I love having the choice to do pro bono work. I love having that choice. And I've always made sure that in my life that I can do that when I want. Like I remember, like a lot of times people from church or the community would come up and say, you know, hey, can I see you for this or that? And I know there's no way they could afford my services, and I know there's no way that I don't take insurance or those kind of things. And so it's at those times when I say, you know, something like, hey, if you come see me on Sunday, I can't charge you because that's my pro bono day, and I would love to see you on Sunday. But we all have our own way of doing that. I think that, you know, it's if you feel a drive inside that you should be doing that, then that's probably the right thing to do, you know. And you know, if we use a cliche word again, karma, you know, karma is a good thing. You know, you put it out there, and you know, I believe that there's going to be a time when you need that service. And I certainly have been the benefactor of people who have, you know, made things possible for me that there's no way I could have afforded. And I think that, you know, how dare I resist giving something, a service of mine to somebody, when I've been able to be the recipient of somebody's service to me. You know, it's sort of like that, what goes around comes around. So, you know, I feel deeply about that, and I've often shared that in Polestar. It's just like, you know, you figure out where, but that volunteerism or that sharing or that giving, I think, is really, really important for humanity. I don't know, you have any comments on Jonathan's comment there of
I do, Brent, and yeah, thank you for the question, Jonathan. I mean, for quite a few years, I felt I should volunteer and that I should give things for free. And when I was functioning from really more of an intellectual place, that was my script. That was the right thing to do, and that's what I was taught by my parents was, oh, you must, you know, be this, be this, be this, be respectful, sensitive. And so I just carried on that spell. It was a bit like a spell in my head. But each time I gave something free, I was actually resentful because it wasn't congruent. It wasn't coming from a place of heart of guts. I wasn't actually being moved to offer freedom,
You know, I'm gonna interrupt there real quick. We have this syndrome we talk about where, you know, people that feel obliged to do service or to do good things,
Yeah.
and they don't get any benefits from it at all. And, you know, we see this over and over again of people that feel that they have to look like they're being of service.
Right. And yes, and this was coming from the fact that there was something in me that was lacking, and I was trying to find it, seek it on the outside. And therefore my giving was not true. And that's not helpful for me, and it wasn't helpful for anybody else. Now, since then, I've done a huge amount of work in many, many different ways on myself, and seem to have landed in a place where, like Brent, you were saying, it's so moving. It's the difference between thinking that I should do these things to this feeling of I'm being moved over there. I don't know why, and you know what? I don't need to know why. But the other week I went, I am going to give a community call for free because I feel that's what life is asking me to do. It's not what I think I should do. So hopefully that was a little bit helpful.
Yeah.
But that's why I offer mentoring sessions to help people meet what moves them.
Yeah, I have one here from Sinead Quigley. It says, Liz lifts the veil, quote unquote, on what's really going on for you at any stage. She reminds me to listen to what I need, probably somebody you know, right? You know, Sinead. What I need, and in my case, it was to breathe. Thank you, Liz. That was just a comment. Thank you. And Sinead also mentioned you cannot calm the storm. Calm yourself, the storm will pass. And it's a great comment, right?
Yeah,
You know,
nothing more to say.
I think it's called like the Hawaiian Prayer or something like that, of like, you know, God, give me the ability to discern between the things I can control and the things I can't control.
Yes.
And to have the courage to do the things that I can control and the patience for the things that I can't control. It's like,
Right.
you know, the storm will pass, but what we can control, or we think we can control at least, is, you know, ourselves. What we can do is in ourselves.
Yes.
Let's see, we got a couple more things here, some interesting ones. From Mary, can we use telemed to help teach relaxation? And I mean, how are you feeling now? I mean, I felt emotions just a moment ago from a question that Jonathan asked. You know, I mean, being able to look at Liz makes me really happy because we don't get to do this very often, right? I don't know. I mean, I think that it's going to have to be our socialization and our interaction for a while. So
Yeah.
I hope that we can get something beneficial out of this. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, yes. I had a conversation which was really helpful yesterday with someone who used to be a very powerful mentor of mine. And we were talking about this form of interaction. And I was like, it's so powerful. And I didn't expect that. And then what we realized is that even though there are however many 100 or more people, I'm looking at you, and each one of us has this experience. They're looking at me as an individual. Whereas if Brent and you know, we were in the group face to face with that many people, you just wouldn't have that level of intimacy.
Yeah.
And so on a very heart level, actually all over me, I'm like, gosh, he's talking to me, that you guys they're talking to me personally. I'm in my room, but there's many other people, but it doesn't matter. It's very, very powerful.
Great. From Sheila, she says, as a family member of a nurse, I made the decision to serve as her support system. She could stay in a hotel, so many healthcare workers don't have this, which affects how they do their job. And, you know, we're seeing story after story of, you know, these heroes. And, you know, some of them do have the support system, some of them don't. Some of them go back home every night and try to keep the distance from their children, you know, not letting their children hug them or those kind of things, trying to understand that. From Deborah, she said, optimism is important in building our immune system, yet the news we hear is relentlessly bad. How do we remain positive when there doesn't seem to be much positive out there? You know, I'm going to take a shot at this one real quick. And then I can see that Liz is ready to jump on this one too. It's like, look, the news makes money off of bad news. If I tell you a joke and it's really funny the first time, you'll laugh one time. If I tell you the same joke a second time, you'll go maybe a courtesy laugh. And the third time, you're going to be like, okay, I got it already. But with bad news, we listen as a people for whatever reason. It's the same news. It hasn't changed in 3 hours. We turn it back on. It's the same hurricane. It's the same political news. It's the same war. It's the same thing. And every 2-3 hours, if we're not careful, we're sucked into that negativity of the media. And I think we have to be able to find sources of information that don't sensationalize the negativity that affects us. I mean, it really can affect us in a negative way if we let it. Thoughts on that, Liz?
Oh, yeah, it would probably be a whole workshop of thoughts on that. I'll try, I'll try
Well, this
to
is where
be.
the NLP comes out too, right? As far as the communication
Well,
and the tones and.
yeah. Look, you know, to maybe expand a little bit on that is when we read things like that, it's spellbinding. Okay, it literally is, and the egoic mind loves the narrative. So each time we do it, we are feeding an aspect of us, which is already extremely powerful, and we're establishing and encoding and embedding the same spell. And the more that we do it, the longer it is to break the spell. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's yeah.
Go ahead. Did you
Nah,
want to finish anything on
I
that?
do.
I know there's so much on it, and you know this is a social problem, and maybe that needs to be another webinar that we we talk about that. Our goal today is to bring you good news and good feelings and allowing you to really sort them out. And I think what Liz is talking about, bringing it even for myself, is just like, you know, quit forcing things and take the time to sit back and to just be and observe what is really going on inside my spirit. What am I, you know, who am I, what's my purpose, you know, and how do I manifest that kind of thing. Beautiful. Kelly Anderson. Hi, Kelly. Kelly is my illustrator for my book. So as long as it's the same Kelly Anderson, no relationship, but we'll post it as cousins. She says, Brent and Liz, do you see this time we are living as being a time for a collective awakening to where more people might be more open to some of the things we are talking about? I want us to come out of this as a wiser people collectively. Liz, you want to take a shot at that?
Oh, wow. Thank you, Kelly. My heart is, I can feel the change of warmth in my heart when you say that, because on that level, that would be my want. I have another side of me that also is watching the realisticness of this. So I'm not saying it's going to be or not going to be because I don't know. But day by day, I'm sitting in situations where I'm noticing on a real level a whole eclectic mix of people's response. Would I like the collective to come out in the way that you've described? Of course. Is that going to be the reality? I don't know. I don't know. But what I am going to be is I'm going to be ready for whatever it is. It doesn't change where I'm going and where you can go in yourself. Okay? So if it's not the collective, it doesn't stop you from actually taking time and keep focusing on what you want for yourself.
Yeah. You know, I remember sort of going through a process and learning, when I learned and started learning things about chakras and the heart chakra and the sutras that accompany the heart chakra, I realized something very deep for myself, was that the peaceful sutra, the first sutra, was really about me and my choice to be peaceful. It wasn't going to come from a religion or a government or a, you know, some leader. It's about me. But the next sutra is harmony. And so maybe what we hope for is that there's more and more people that are taking this time to seek peaceful resolution, to seek awareness, to seek inspiration for themselves. And people that are doing that, that are more conscious and more aware, when we come together, I'm in that group, but when we come together, there is harmony. And Deepak Chopra always says, when you get about 23% of the world seeking that level of harmony, that there would be enough of a movement of peace that it would affect everybody in the world. So, maybe we can be hopeful of that, but it starts with each of us. It's really important. I have something here that says, a comment from May, and she just mentions that she has aging in-laws and afraid, for them. And I think this is all of our story for most of us. If you have parents or grandparents that are in the critical age and they're not close to you physically, and you can't visit them if they get sick, and you can't help them if they need help, in a lot of these situations, because we actually bring a greater risk to them. And I think that, getting in to FaceTime and to call them frequently, and to just, take this time to really dig deep and appreciate the love and the gratitude that we have for these people in our lives. It's like, and again, it doesn't have to be just family. It's just people that have been mentors to us. And, there's something beautiful about having this time to express that gratitude and to express love to anybody in our families, anybody in our friend circles, anybody in our mentor circles in our life. There's a comment here from Anna. She says, I'm teaching classes on Zoom and asking people to donate to our local crisis center rather than pay me. It feels good to give and play my part in this crisis. So thank you, Anna, for sharing that. That's a great idea. From Anthea Bell, she says, it's wonderful to hear you both. I wonder, with so many resources like class or therapy having transitioned to an online format, which in itself is wonderful given current circumstances, how do you both create a sense of connectivity, your word, Liz, connectivity, which in my experience is a thing that creates the deepest level of healing, both emotionally and physically. It feels as though we need collectivity, community, especially at this moment. Any thought on the concept of connectivity? I know you mentioned it earlier as being one of the really important elements in your practice.
Yeah, when I sit with anyone is to start in a place where I don't want anything from that person. So I'm not sitting wanting anything from them, because that can be really easy. Is that I have an agenda and I think that they should go in a certain direction, but actually to start in a very spacious place where I pay attention to me as well as the other person. And we just start there, because already in that, without even speaking, is communication. So already there's a connection without you speaking, if you settle in yourself without wanting from the other.
Great. Thank you. This is from Nesrin, I think is her name, says, hi Brent, hi Liz. How can we deal with the anxiety coming from not knowing anything about the situation, not knowing when it will end, and how will be the world, how will be our life after? Struggle with the lack of visibility of the future. And I'll take a whack at that one, and then Liz, you can come in afterwards if you want. This goes back to what I was saying about, finding the inner peace. I think that, we really are spiritual beings, and I don't mean spiritual in the sense of religious. I think religious is very different than spirituality, although I think a lot of us can find spirituality in our religions and our rituals. But what that should be driving us to do is to have time to reflect on our relationship with ourselves, like who am I, what am I? I remember having a major gestalt one time where I was always saying how my family was the most important thing to me, but I traveled like 200 days out of the year. And there was a conflict inside of me because I was thinking and saying what I was groomed and trained to say, that, my priorities are, God, family, career. And yet my life was reflecting career, family, God. And, there was conflict. I wasn't being true to myself. And I think that I think one of the key things for us is when we feel that we are present. And I can tell you that for me, the times that I feel most present is when I'm working with a patient or when I'm teaching, are 2 times in my life that I don't worry about anything outside. I don't worry about phone. I don't worry about finances. I don't worry about politics, that I can really be present in that moment. I cherish that time because it's a time that I feel that I go through a spiritual healing as well, because it's just present time. And I believe the more time that we are present in a relationship, in a moment, in a meditation, in a reflection on something we just read, that those are the times that we are going to have that sense of peace and that sense of faith that things are going to work out, that, that this is not the end for us. It's not, and I think that we get caught up so much in the fear that we lose sight of the hope. And hope is a healing, energetic emotion. The minute that we create the sense of hope in a patient by creating a positive movement experience without pain, they start to get better really fast. It doesn't make any sense physiologically, but they go from being in a painful, I can't do this state, to I'm healing, I'm getting better, I can do it, much faster than physiology and tissues can heal. And so I think we can do the same thing with our spirit. We can, take the moment and create the positive spiritual experience in our life that creates the hope and the peace in our heart, that even in tragedy, even in death, even in disease, even in all these natural disasters, that I can and you can somehow find a peaceful state and hope and faith in humanity, in the earth itself, in our nature as a member of humanity. And to me, it gives me, great hope, even when I feel times are sad or when I feel times are desperate, that, we can find that. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else. We're just getting bombarded with comments that I want to try to get through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes, but maybe we can take turns on them as they come in. Liz, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just going to say one really quick thing, and this is probably relevant to any question that's coming in. Whatever is coming up for you, just include it. Notice what's coming up and allow it to be there. So often when something seems negative, it's almost like we want to try to change it and get rid of it. That's information. Anything that is arising is potential for growth. Include what's coming and allow it to be there. And I always say, welcome the fear. Welcome the fear. And trust that something's going to happen that is unexpected.
That was part of that book, Untethered Soul, too. It was
Yes.
like, just observe. Don't be afraid of the feeling of fear or anger or sadness or jealousy. Just observe it,
Yes.
recognize it, acknowledge it, because there'll also be feelings of joy and peace and happiness and,
Yes.
pleasure. So I just have to give a little shout out to Jonathan. I got your message. Thank you. I will take advantage of that when I make it to London. A little personal note. From Sarah, can you teach faith and can you teach patience? I think life teaches those things. But Liz, what do you think?
Sarah, this is for everyone as well.
Yeah.
Just be still for a moment. And notice when I say the word patience, just allow that to drop into your system. There's nothing that you have to do. Just allow yourself to receive that and see what comes.
Nice.
Whatever comes, just be that.
All right. We're going to keep moving on with these things. Thank you, Liz. That was beautiful. This is from Sarah W. Another Sarah says, so true about the negative news. Does Liz have any strategies to deal with the negative inner voice that seems even more apparent spending so much time alone? I think it goes right to what you're just doing there, right?
Yeah,
give her a tip, Liz. Come on.
You know, I know I'm someone who's can be potentially really annoying with this because I don't give a direct answer, and there's a real intention behind that. And Brent's the one that that does that so beautifully clearly. I really work with the moment and present moment. I'm going to give you a little story. Okay, today in a snapshot, I noticed I had some fear coming up about going to the supermarket, for goodness sake. And, you know, should I wear a mask? Should I not wear a mask? And instead of being frozen by it, I went, you know what? I'm going to let my fear play out. And so I covered my face and I literally allowed that part of me to manifest the fear and treat it, going to the supermarket, as my training. Not because I wanted to buy food, but because I wanted to learn something about myself. Something in me was going, face your fear. So that's what I did. You don't have to face the fear and go into meditation. The practice ground is in everyday life. It's in everyday life. Don't wait to sit quietly. Life is calling you right now. And that's what I did when I went to the supermarket, and I learned something about myself.
So how did you feel after
that? Joy. Because the thing is, every time I do this, I have to say, it's not me just saying this. Every time I choose to meet the truth, what I thought was there is not what it is. It's just my head trying to control what it thinks is there, which is not true.
Yeah. Again, I would even make the reference, like I've said it a couple of times, but the Untethered Soul did a good job of sort of getting, you know, at least for me, to sort of detach from that defining myself by the running thoughts. Like, yes. I'm not afraid. I'm feeling fear. I'm not afraid, but I feel fear with this situation. I'm not a scared person. I just feel fear, or I feel jealousy. Does that make me a jealous person, or is it just the fact that I am observing that what I just observed, I felt jealousy, you know, I felt this emotion, or I felt this anger or something. It was very helpful for me because it, you know, it also freed me from feeling like I had to identify myself as what I was thinking versus what I was feeling. And they were a little different for me because I often would go into analytical mode.
Right.
And I'll make the decision out of there. A couple things here going on. Let's see. Julian's from Julianne. She said, keywords, if we let it. So again, that idea of allowing or letting or being present, I think, is important. And I apologize if I pronounce some names incorrectly. I think Sinead should be Sinead. Sinead.
Oh, Sinead.
Sinead, yeah. And I think I called Mary May, but you'll forgive me. I'm trying to work with a couple of different media sources, and I got one pair of glasses, so they're all like different distances. Just being honest with you all. From Marta, she said, Dear Brent and Liz, don't you think that what scares people more are the news, government around the world, all negatives rather than COVID-19? Lots of love from Poland. And Marta, I think, you know, again, I know some of these questions have come in earlier and we've already answered them a little bit. But the idea is that, yes, I do think that the news sensationalizes things. I think we get trapped in it. I think we get running thoughts, and, you know, and it does create fear. And I think we have to really practice good judgment as to where we find our news sources. I think we have to practice good judgment on how we allow the news source to affect us, and, you know, how we act upon good knowledge and information that can protect us and protect our family versus fear that actually puts us into a decreased immune, you know, resistance and has other effects that are not healthy for us if we get stuck in it. From Sheila, says, spot on observation, Liz, super mixed response. I'm not quite sure what the mixed response is. I know there's a lot of interesting, anything you want to, super mixed response from Sheila.
Good.
It's good, right?
Yes, good, because whatever is coming is what is needing to happen. That's the truth. We might not want it, but it's only part of your head that doesn't want it. Okay, life is saying, see this.
Yeah.
And then from there, be with that, include that, because that's who you are. Okay. I want to say, watch the news that's in your head. We don't need to just watch news outside in the external environment. We have a lot of news going on inside our head of our own. So, so let's just also get that perspective, because it's really important. If we don't have this news is definitely going to fill that space. Okay.
All right. I'm going to put a moratorium on messages answering. I have a couple more that I'm going to read off. We'll do in these last 5 minutes, and then we got to keep you to that hour. This one is from Sarah. She says that she's been participating in the Ego Detox workshop with Liz this February and made a huge difference. And so I find myself in a very good place to go through this. Stay still and wait for answers is very helpful. Thank you very much, Liz. So there's a good testimonial. Thank you, Sarah. Sinead said, when family isn't what you wish it were, when relationships are broken, especially with parents, despite years of losing yourself trying to fix it, how can it be okay during this time not to have any communication? And, sometimes in the most dire states of life is where some of those broken relationships get mended. And sometimes they don't, because it takes two people to be in a relationship. And, it takes two people that are willing. And I know there's people in my life that I would love to, rekindle that relationship. And I've tried, and, they're not willing to meet me somewhere, but I keep trying, and I keep hoping, and I keep praying that, that relationship's important to me. And I hope that, I don't think we lose faith in that. I think we keep opening our heart, and we keep being the best person we can be, but we also, at some point in time can't lose sleep over the fact that somebody else is not willing or not interested in amending those things, even in families. I think sometimes it's just, and that's the toughest. From Lauren, she says, Liz and Brent, as many people going through this time, there's a lot of constant change happening daily. How would you suggest we find harmony in this? And I think, Liz, you answered that nicely. I think just, setting back, being quiet. This one is from Joe. She said, I can see the positives to be found through this time, and I appreciate them. But that doesn't stop there being times when it feels overwhelming and scary. I'm finding myself fighting these feelings, but is there something to be said for sitting these emotions and allowing them instead of fighting to be positive? I think that's the clearest answer that's come out today, don't you think, Liz? I think.
Yeah, be them, because they are you. So if you include them, then it's less likely you're going to fragment yourself. Remember, the principle of Polestar's number 6 is integration, and that's one word that I would say here. As soon as we start separating and discounting things that we don't like, you're fragmenting yourself. Okay, so inclusion, that's what we're doing here. Even though Brent and I can see Brent, but I can't see you guys. But I can only imagine that I'm speaking to you all, because it's really important for me that you are part of our discussion here. That's the same with feelings, that inclusion.
Yeah. This comment is from Natalie. She said, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I'm gathering for 30 minutes 3 times a week with my clients to offer check-ins and opportunities to sit with the feelings in their body, to breathe and share connection. I'm humbled by how helpful this space is for me and for them. I'm beginning to embrace the value of my skills beyond being physically in the same space as someone, a true gift coming from this situation. Thank you, Natalie. I think that's the essence of what we're talking about here. And I know somebody else had asked, do we think we can have these kind of experiences without the physical presence? And I think it's obvious that the answer is yes. And somebody else had asked about being able to how do we maintain connections, and what's the best thing we can do with our clientele base since we can't see them regularly. And I mean, I even did something where I've just set up a Calendly schedule for my patients to call in for a 15-minute report for free and just check and see how they're doing and have a face-to-face. And I can tell a lot by just the color of their face and their eyes and things like that as we talk and see each other in those moments. So those can be very special moments to continue that relationship with those clients. Samar said, how to find solace when living alone and loved ones don't show up consistently to help them through the ebb and flow of weathering the long hours, through simple acts such as video calls. And again, I think that you hit that on the head. I think there's so many people alone. I'm a professor at a university in Miami, and I have some young students, and they're all by themselves, and they can't go home because if they go home to their state or their country, they have to go into quarantine and they won't be able to come back into school. So they're sticking it out, and they're really suffering because they don't have the maturity of being able to be still with themselves. They don't have that, and I think that it's very hard for them. And so it's been great having the chance to talk to them on a very different level as their advisor at the university, about the patients and being present and things that they can do and how they can communicate with their family regularly. So good comments. This from Lucinda says, Brene Brown's most recent podcast on Friday with David Kessler spoke about us all experiencing feelings of grief at this moment. I really like Brene Brown. I always like, she's interesting. Thank you for that, Lucinda. Sherry Allen, it's a private one, so I'm going to keep that one private. This is from Charlotte, and I think this is my last one. Thank you for the chat this morning. I'm really enjoying offering free videos and classes to my community through this time. We are on lockdown for 4 weeks in New Zealand. Thank you for joining us from New Zealand. However, this is likely to go on longer, and public studios, etc., will remain closed. Eventually, I will need to support myself financially. So how do I transition? Did somebody pay you to write this, Charlotte? Because our next webinar is with Juan Nieto next week on Thursday, and we're going to be talking about how we survive in our studios through the virtual world. So make sure you come to that one. And that we do need to have, that's, I think Liz made a mention of this, is you do have to put food on your plate as well, and you do have to cover your cost, and you invested a lot in yourself, and you all have great services that you render that have high value. And again, I think it's a time where there's going to be certain people that can't afford right now because they've lost their jobs, and there's going to be others that can afford. And I think, Liz, you mentioned that you did almost like a sliding scale of just donate what you can.
Yeah.
In some of the events. Yeah. I don't know if you want to share anything about that.
Yeah, the word creativity comes up, is that when we drop out of the fear and the panic and the chaos, creativity is possible. Okay. And in this situation, that's why it's really important to drop into an experience of presence, because in that place, you'll come up with ideas that you would never come up with if you stay in panic. Panic is like a contracted space. So as soon as we kind of soften and settle, then a creativity will come out of you, and that will serve you in coming up with ideas for what you need. And I'm really happy to speak to any of you who are struggling to kind of move over that edge of of resistance, if you can't come up with an idea. Really happy to kind of check in if you need any support.
And we'll have Liz's information that'll be attached to there. And if you wanted to either do some of her workshops or a session with her, you'll find a way to contact her.
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't really have any more time. I do have a couple more comments that I'll make quickly on this, and then we'll wrap it up. But this is from Somaya, and it says, thank you, Brent. Medicines are love. Brent and Liz, this is a gift I've been embracing each day as if I'm on a retreat. Before this, I was teaching 35 to 40 hours a week, neglected my family, friends, and even my own need and self-care. But today, I have been able to reflect and reconnect with my heart, family, and community. I've allowed myself to sit with any emotion, fear and sadness, without judgment, thank you for your time. I'm immensely grateful. Thank you very much for that. Very nice. And then Togahan is said, the most difficult thing is this period is for me to manage my son, who is 2.5 years old. He wants to go out and play with friends, and sometimes I can't even find a good excuse to tell him to make his stay home. But actually we have to, because we live in a crowded city, and this is the best thing to keep our health and safety. Any advice? And you know, all my kiddos are grown adults now, but I certainly remember those days and trying to keep them inside and not have a good reason. I think that you know, it's going to be a time that they will remember in their life. Even at 2.5, they might have some memory of having to be on lockdown like we all are. And you know, I think we just have to be really wise and find creative ways to entertain and to you know, exercise and play and do things inside. Liz, you had a comment?
Yeah, really quickly. This is important, because if we're busy trying to find ways of entertaining and doing things that we think we should be doing for our little ones and for our children, then we're going to lose contact with them, the true contact. So my advice to you is to let go of needing to find options, because if you be in contact with him, and all I have an image of you making eye-to-eye contact with him as regular as possible, that is the best play that you can possibly do.
Yeah. Hey, to wrap up, and I want to just thank everybody for joining us today. There have been very thoughtful questions and comments, and I hope that you know, Liz and I have been able to, again, as she prefaced early, just to be beside you and to appreciate your spirit and your energy and the emotions that you are experiencing, as we all are. Liz, I'd like you just to take the last minute here and just maybe something more along the lines with your human home project, maybe something you could leave with all of us, sort of based off of our conversation and discussion today as a closing comment.
Yeah, so as a conclusion, so one thing that comes up for me is that creating space and being space brings possibility. That when space appears, much is possible. As soon as we fill, we contract, we resist, we deny, we suppress, more pain, more pain. So my want, not just for me, but for all of you, is to really allow yourself. It's not easy when I say let go. Well, what I want to say is just begin by softening. As soon as you feel yourself start to contract, because that is fear, is a contraction within your system. And your body will give you a signal. And that's the beautiful thing of the vessel that we have. It will tell you you're contracting. And in that moment, what I'd say to you is soften and smile. This sounds strange in some ways, but welcome the contraction and then smile into the area of your body that you are experiencing the emotion. And when you smile into it, something's going to happen. And it's not what you expect. And the thing is that part of our mind is always looking for what's predictable, and we're looking for what's permanent. This is not permanent. Only the ego that looks for permanence. So drop down from your head, because it's only a small part of you. It's like looking at one star in the sky. There's much, much more to you that is waiting to be listened to and waiting to be heard. And now is the time. This is what's being asked of us. It's time to listen. Not out there, in here. Inside.
Yeah. Well, Liz, thank you so much. Love you. Thankful for you. Thank you for your words of wisdom, for sharing with us today, and especially thank all of you that are guests that have been with us today. And we want you to know we love you too, and you know that you know, find that still space and let's get together often. So I think we can get together more often now than we used to be able to. Have to fly to London once a year, and now I've seen Liz in 2 weeks in a row. So life is good. God bless you all, and find that peace, and let's get through this, and we'll keep the Pilates Hour going and other things, meditations, and we'll ship some good information to you in conjunction with this particular webinar that you attended today. And if you didn't attend it, you're listening to it afterwards, we thank you for signing up, and hopefully we bring you some thoughtful messages and some peace, also some ways to find some peace. And we'll see you the next one. I mentioned that next week, Thursday, 3 o'clock, same time, Juan Nieto from Spain will be joining me, and he'll be helping me talk about sort of virtual work, whether it's teaching courses for those of you that are educators of Pilates or yoga, or anything of how we work in teaching, and also education. So how do we deal with virtual education? So we hope that a lot of you will join us. Tell your friends about being with us next week. And this concludes our Pilates Hour.